The storm broke over the frontier like God himself had torn the sky in half. Lightning split the horizon, white fire licking across endless black plains, and the thunder rolled so heavy it shook the ribs of the earth. Rain came sideways, stinging against skin and leather, and in the distance coyotes howled, drowned out by the fury of the heavens. Through that chaos rode a man. Elias McGraw hunched in the saddle, the brim of his hat pulled low, water streaming off his coat. His horse staggered through mud that clutched at hooves like quicksand. He was weary, more than weary. He was the kind of tired that came from years of carrying ghosts. Scars from war marked him, though they were mostly the kind a man carried on the inside. He rode not toward anything certain, but away from everything he couldn't change. Lightning revealed the silhouette of a wagon up ahead, tilted in the muck like a gravestone half sunk. The canvas top was shredded, the wheels sunk to their hubs. Elias slowed his horse, hand hovering near the butt of his Colt. Something moved inside. He dismounted, boots sinking into sucking earth, and pushed the flap aside. Inside, in the shadows, a woman crouched. Her dress was soaked, her hair plastered to her face. In her trembling hands she clutched a broken rifle, its barrel bent, useless as driftwood. Her eyes, wild, desperate, met his. "Don't come closer," she rasped. Introduction of conflict. Her name, he learned in those stuttering moments between thunder, was Clara Harrow. She had been on the road for 3 days, walking until her legs failed, dragging herself into the wagon when the storm caught her. Her farm was gone, burned, her kin dead or scattered. Bandits had swept through with torches and laughter, leaving only ashes behind. Her voice shook as she spoke, but her eyes carried a fire. Hunger had hollowed her cheeks, rain had chapped her lips, but still she clung to that broken rifle like it could keep the world away. Elias lowered his hands, made no move toward his gun. "You won't last the night out here," he said. His voice was steady low, carrying a certainty born of too many storms survived. "I've lasted this far," she shot back. He studied her, mud on her dress, fear carved into the lines of her face. There was pride there, too, the kind that kept a person standing long after they should have collapsed. He recognized it, because it was the same thing that had kept him alive when men around him had fallen. "My ranch is a few miles north," he told her. "Roof will hold. Firewood's dry. You need food. You'll die out here alone." Her fingers twitched against the broken rifle, her jaw set. She wanted to refuse him. He could see it, wanted to keep her pride, even if it killed her. But the storm screamed above them, and her body was shaking too hard to hide. Finally, in a voice barely above the storm, she whispered, "Why would you help me?" "Because I know what it means," he said, "to have nothing left but the will to keep breathing." Man versus nature. They did not have time to argue further. The storm worsened, rain pouring so heavy it blurred the world into silver sheets. The wagon rocked with every gust. Then came the sound, low, guttural, carried on the wind. A howl. Elias stiffened. His hand went to his Colt, eyes scanning the shadows. Another howl answered, closer this time. Wolves, drawn by the scent of weakness, of a stranded horse, of human flesh caught helpless in the storm. Elias snapped the broken rifle from Clara's hands, tossing it aside. "Stay behind me." The first set of yellow eyes appeared at the edge of the stormlight, gleaming low to the ground. Then another, then 3 more. Shapes slinked from the darkness. Gray bodies soaked but hungry, their ribs sharp against wet fur. Elias fired once into the mud, the sound cracking louder than thunder. The wolves hesitated but did not run. Hunger made them bold. "Fire!" Elias muttered. He shoved open a crate in the wagon, pulled free scraps of canvas. With flint and trembling hands, Clara helped him spark it alive and soon torches burned against the rain, smoking and spitting. The wolves lunged. Gunfire roared, torches swung. Elias fired with precision, each shot sending a wolf yelping into the storm. Clara thrusting torches to keep them back. Lightning lit the chaos like a battlefield remembered. The smell of wet fur and gunpowder mixed with the stink of fear. At last, the pack scattered, tails low, vanishing into the blackness. Elias lowered his smoking gun, chest heaving. Clara clutched the torch, knuckles white. Her eyes found his, wide with something between terror and awe. "You come with me," Elias said firmly, "or you'll die before dawn." Her lips trembled, but she nodded. The confession. The ranch was a lonely shape against the horizon, weather-beaten, half-forgotten, but still standing. Elias led her inside, the storm battering the windows as if trying to claw its way through. Inside, the air smelled of old wood, leather, and smoke. A single photograph sat on the mantel. A family in uniform, smiling before the war had stolen them. The edges were worn, as if touched too many times. Clara saw it, but said nothing. Elias built the fire high. He laid bread, beans, and salted meat on the table. Clara ate like a starved creature, tears slipping down her cheeks as warmth returned to her hands. Silence stretched. The crack of the fire was the only voice between them. Finally, Clara set her bowl aside. Her shoulders trembled. "I should tell you," her voice was raw, "I'm no virgin. Bandits, they didn't just burn the farm. They took what they wanted, left me broken." Her eyes brimmed with shame, as if expecting disgust, rejection, or pity. She turned away from him, unable to bear the weight of her own words. For a long moment, Elias said nothing. The fire popped, sparks leaping. Then, steady as a man planting roots, he reached across the table and laid his hand gently on hers. "I never wanted perfection," he said, voice rough but sure. "Only you." Her breath caught. She stared at him, eyes wide, searching his face for any trace of mockery. There was none. The storm raged outside, but in that small, firelit room, a fragile bond was struck, not born of innocence, but of survival, of scars, of two souls who had nothing left but the chance, just maybe, to belong again. New life, fragile trust, almost equals 300 words. The days that followed were not easy, but they were steadier than the storm. Clara stayed. At first she lingered near the door, ready to flee if Elias showed even the slightest cruelty. But he never did. He rose with the dawn, fed the stock, mended fences, worked until sweat carved lines down his face. And slowly she joined him. She carried buckets from the well, stacked wood, helped mend a chicken coop torn by the storm. She moved carefully, still haunted, but she worked as though labor itself could scrape away the memory of what she'd endured. Elias didn't press her with questions. He didn't fill the silence with empty words. He simply showed her, by example, how to survive. He taught her to tie knots that held against the wind, how to check a horse's hooves for stones, how to set a snare line for rabbits. And Clara, without meaning to, taught him something in return. When she laughed softly at his muttered curses over stubborn fence posts, he realized he hadn't heard laughter in his house in years. When she laid a hand on his arm after supper, just a small gesture of thanks, he realized how long it had been since anyone had touched him without demand or violence. The trust grew not with words, but with gestures. Her learning to cook beans just the way he liked, his leaving the better blanket folded at the foot of her bed. Small things, but small things in the wilderness meant everything. Man versus self. Yet even as trust grew, shadows lingered. Elias carried his own. Some nights, Clara would hear him shout in his sleep, fighting battles long since buried in fields far away. The Civil War had left its scars, and Elias bore them in silence. At dawn he would rise, jaw set, as if pretending nothing had happened. But Clara saw, and Clara had her own demons. Sometimes, when his shadow fell across her unexpectedly, she would flinch, just barely, but enough for him to notice. Shame would flash in her eyes when she realized he had seen. She doubted herself constantly. Did she deserve the roof over her head? Did she deserve the food, the safety? The question burned in her every time she caught Elias's steady gaze. She feared one day he would see her as ruined, as less. One evening by the corral, the two of them stood side by side watching the sun bleed over the plains. Clara spoke before she could stop herself. "Do you ever wish you could go back? Before the war?" Elias's eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. "Sometimes, but wishing don't bring back the dead. Only makes the living heavier." Clara swallowed, hands twisting in her skirt. "And what if the living ain't worth keeping?" Elias turned then, his gaze sharp. For a moment, she thought he might scold her. Instead, he said quietly, "You're still breathing. That's worth more than you think." Her eyes stung. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to. In those words, she heard not pity, but truth. And though the doubts clawed at her, she began to think maybe, just maybe, she could belong here beside him. Mysterious ally appears. It was late autumn when Elias took Clara hunting. Food stores were thin, and the land had not been generous. They tracked deer into the foothills, the air sharp with frost. That's when they found him. A man lay half hidden in the brush, blood streaking his side. His skin was painted with mud and ash, his hair braided with eagle feathers. A Comanche warrior. His breathing was ragged, shallow, his hand still clutching a spear. Clara dropped to her knees instantly. "He's dying." Elias pulled her back. "Leave him. His people would do the same to us." But Clara shook her head fiercely. "I know what it means to be left to die. We can't." Their eyes locked. For a long moment Elias said nothing, then finally cursed under his breath and knelt. He tore strips of cloth, pressed them to the wound. The warrior's eyes opened briefly, dark and sharp. He did not speak, but something flickered in his gaze, defiance, gratitude, or both. They brought him back to the ranch. Days passed in silence as he healed. He spoke little, but his presence filled the room like smoke. Clara called him Talon, after the hawk tattoo across his chest. He accepted the name with a nod. Elias remained wary, hand never far from his gun, but Clara insisted. "He's alive because of us. That means something." Talon said little, but in his silence there was a gravity. And as days turned into weeks, his eyes followed them both, watching, weighing, as though deciding if this fragile bond was worth his steel. First attack. The answer came one night. It began with the smell of smoke. Clara woke to it first, jerking upright in her bed. The barn was burning. Flames clawed at the night sky, lighting the ranch in a hellish glow. Shouts followed. Men on horseback, bandits, the same who had torched her farm. Their laughter cut through the crackle of flames. Elias was already at the window, rifle in hand. "Stay down," he barked. But Clara grabbed a pistol from the shelf. Her hands trembled, but her jaw was set. She would not run this time. Gunfire tore through the night. Elias fired from the doorway, cutting down the first rider. Clara crouched beside him, firing wildly, her ears ringing with each shot. Her heart pounded so loud she thought it would burst. The barn collapsed, sparks scattering across the yard. A shadow leapt from the darkness. One of the bandits, blade raised. Clara screamed, fired point blank. The man dropped at her feet. Her breath caught. She'd never killed before. Elias turned, eyes wide, not with judgment, but with something close to pride. Then Talon appeared, moving like a ghost in the firelight. Silent, swift, he cut down two men before they even realized he was there. His spear flashed, his knife glinted, and suddenly the bandits who remained pulled back, shouting curses into the night. When the last hoofbeats faded, only the fire remained. The barn was gone, the ranch scarred, but they were alive. Clara's hands shook, gun slipping from her grasp. Elias caught her wrist gently, steadying her. You did what you had to. And in the shadows, Talon stood watch, his eyes unreadable, yet protective, preparing for war, almost equals 350 words. The smell of smoke still lingered in the air long after the bandits fled. The barn lay in blackened ruins, its frame collapsed into ash and ember. But Elias knew men like that didn't simply ride away. They regrouped. They came back, hungrier. They'll return, Elias said grimly, staring out at the horizon. His side still ached from where a bullet had grazed him, but his voice was steady. Clara swallowed hard, arms crossed against the chill of the night. Then we make sure we're ready. From that moment, the ranch became a fortress. Elias sharpened blades, checked rifles, laid down powder and shot. Talon, wordless as ever, showed them how to set snares, dig trenches, and weave sharpened stakes into the earth where hooves would stumble. Clara carried wood, hauled water, sewed bandages, and stood watch with her pistol. It became a rhythm. Work, sweat, silence, the occasional grim nod between men who had seen too much war and a woman who refused to be broken again. At night, by the fire, Clara and Elias sat side by side. Neither spoke much, but in the way his hand brushed hers as he passed the tin cup, in the way she leaned against his shoulder when her body trembled with exhaustion, there was something more than words. The bond was there now, undeniable, forged not in innocence, but in survival. And as the cold wind carried with it the distant sound of hoofbeats, Elias felt something stir deep in his chest, a reason to fight harder than he ever had before. The climactic showdown. They came at dawn. The horizon lit not with the sun but with dust, a storm of hooves kicking up the earth. Shouts rose, harsh and cruel, echoing across the plains. Bandits, dozens of them. Elias stood at the gate, rifle raised. Talon crouched low in the brush, spear ready. Clara was at the second-floor window of the ranch house, pistol clenched in both hands. The first shots cracked the morning silence. Bullets whined past wood and stone. Elias fired back, dropping a rider from his saddle. The man fell hard, trampled by his own. The bandits charged. Horses screamed as they hit hidden pits lined with stakes. One man was thrown, another crushed. Chaos erupted. Elias fought with grim determination, his rifle reloading and firing in practiced rhythm. Talon moved like a shadow, appearing, striking, vanishing. His knife found throats, his spear broke ribs. Clara trembled as the riders drew closer, but when one aimed for Elias, her finger pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, and the man toppled backward. Her heart hammered, but she fired again, steadier this time. The barn, already a ruin, caught fire once more, the flames spreading as oil from the bandits' torches spilled. Smoke blackened the sky. The ranch seemed to burn with it, but through the fire and the dust, the three stood unyielding. Elias's shirt was torn, blood seeping from his arm, but his jaw was set like iron. Talon fought as though each strike avenged generations. And Clara, her dress torn and face streaked with ash, fought with a ferocity she didn't know she had. For every rider that came, another fell. The ranch groaned beneath the storm, but it did not break. The turning point. The fight stretched into the heart of dawn. Then came the shot that changed everything. Elias staggered. A bullet caught him in the side, spinning him to the ground. He gasped, clutching at the wound, blood running hot between his fingers. Clara screamed his name. For a moment the world tilted. She saw herself alone again, saw everything she loved slipping into the fire. Run, Elias rasped, trying to lift his rifle with shaking hands. Clara, go! But she didn't run. Something inside her broke, and then hardened. She turned, lifted her pistol, and fired into the face of the man who had shot Elias. He toppled backward, his horse rearing. The others closed in, but Clara planted her feet beside Elias. "I'm not leaving you," she whispered fiercely. And in that moment, she wasn't the broken woman he had found in a wagon. She wasn't the victim of bandits or the shadow of her shame. She was a fighter, standing her ground. Talon appeared then, his spear flashing, cutting down the last of the riders who dared to press forward. The bandits broke, retreating into the rising sun, leaving behind their dead and their fury. The ranch was scarred, burning, but it still stood. And so did they. Resolution and bittersweet ending. When the dust settled, silence fell heavy. Smoke curled from the barn's remains. Blood soaked into the soil. Elias leaned against the porch rail, pale but alive. Clara sat beside him, hands still trembling, her pistol long since emptied. Talon stood at the edge of the yard, watchful, his face unreadable. The ranch was ruined, yet somehow more whole than it had been before. The fire had taken the old, but in its ashes, something new had been born. Elias turned his head, his voice rough, but steady. Perfection don't keep a man warm at night. Love does. Clara's throat tightened. She reached for his hand, and he let her hold it. In his touch, she felt not pity, but belonging. Not perfection, but something stronger. And as the sun rose over the ashes, the three of them, scarred, bloodied, but alive, knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. In the ashes of struggle, they found not perfection, but something stronger, belonging. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. More tales of love, loss, and survival on the frontier await you here, where every scar tells a story.